For everybody who is here for the meeting, we apologize for our getting started a little late. We had asked for a lot of paperwork, and it was waiting for us when we got here, so we're passing it out, and there's quite a bit of it, so give us just a few more minutes. Do we have anything just to record? Doing it up there? Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. Lisa, you ready? Oh, go ahead. Okay. I guess we. Well, let's go ahead and get started because we are late. This is a committee meeting of the Advisory Administrative Services Committee of the City Council. We are here today to begin discussions about a proposal to take race off of city forms. The members here today with me are Councilman Fred Richardson, who was the sponsor of the proposal, along with Councilwoman Bess Rich, another committee member. Also in attendance, Councilman Joel Daves, President of the Council, Levon Manzi, and Vice President C.J. Small. Yeah, he is here as well. We have a number of staff and department heads here this morning, mostly at our request, because the City of Mobile has a number of documents that do require race. We have been going through paperwork. We asked for copies of all city documents, and we have a lot. So we've been going through them very quickly, noticed some interesting things on some of them. But mainly what we're here today is to look at the various documents that the city has, that the city uses, and determine if race is removed from these documents, what impact, if any, it will have. In many instances, why race is required at all, what is it for? We have some municipal court records that we have not received. Judge Whidden has sent a questionnaire out to the judges, asking them a number of questions about if race was removed from their documents, what impact that would have. Some of these documents we have are very obviously related to state, federal government, and those types of things, of course, you know, the city is not going to try to change or do anything else with. But we wanted to see what was there and cover all the possibilities, just to make sure that if we move forward with this, that there are no unintended consequences. As a lot of good ideas are out there, but sometimes those good ideas have some unintended consequences, things that we don't intend to have happen. I just want to work through everything before we move on to try to vote on them. So with that, we've heard from Councilman Richardson a number of times. I don't know that he necessarily needs to get into all the specifics as to why this proposal has been put forward. So I think what I would like to do is hear from some of the main staff members If you are here representing a department that specifically deals with state and federal government and your forms, would you just raise your hand? Specifically. All of those forms that you have provided us in specifically dealing with the state and federal government, if race was removed, would it have an impact on what you do and what your requirements are? If so, then. Okay. Why don't we start with you all? Leslie, why don't y'all just go to the microphone and just introduce yourself, which department you're with, and the documents that you use in your department, and how your information or your recording would be impacted if we took race off your documents.
Okay, I'm Leslie Ray, the city's Human Resource Director. We only have one form that we collect race information. It's just general confidential information from new hires while we onboard them. We record that information. We are required to do a biannual report for federal government, which is the EEO4 report that gives a breakdown of our workforce by race and by job category. That's required reporting. Also, that same information is used on the equal employment opportunity plans that we must have in place for to receive federal grant money. And that also compares our data to the community labor statistics. So that is a necessary piece of information. It could affect our funding.
Okay, and you gave us one of those forms, right?
I did.
We have so many, it's kind of hard to tell which ones are which.
It just says confidential information. It's an internal form, but that's the way we used to collect that. Also, in the context of those forms, race and ethnicity have two different meanings. Race collects the information on an employee's race, such as white, African American, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, and so forth, whereas the ethnicity question that may be asked, that's to indicate whether they are Hispanic, Latino, or not. There's actually a difference between the two.
Hey, is this the form City of Mobile Human Resources Department requests for confidential information?
That's correct.
Okay, so you're telling us that they have to remain as is because of what's required by the federal government?
That is correct.
Okay.
Madam
Right.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I was, if you're dealing with a person, a Mobilian from India, what would they put down?
I'm sorry, I have a hard time hearing you.
If you were dealing with a person from India, what would they put down as their race?
We ask that they indicate their race, but they're also, if they're multiracial, there's an opportunity for them to report that. If an employee wishes to not report that information, we do exclude them from the reports, but I would say 1 out of 1,000 employees may choose not to report their race. We have had no problems in the past with them reporting that. That is confidential information. That's the only report that we use that information on.
Okay, any other questions? Leslie? Thank you, Leslie. Next, y'all, all of you all who raised your hands.
Good evening. I stood up to talk about how these taking race off the forms that we use at the police department. In particular, many of our forms, our internal forms, mimic our state forms, and race is a requirement. In particular, when we're dealing with applying for many federal grants, it also, in the culture that we live in today, in the community we live in, where it was once normal for somebody to stand up in front of a crowd and say A, B, or C happen, we are deferring to video or other means to try to make sure that people believe what we're saying. When we track the racial demographics in our community, it affords us the opportunity to provide back in visual form what we have actually done by way of demographics in our community. So putting race on our forms really helps us give back to the community some of the answers to the questions that they're asking when they talk about racial disparities that maybe the police department have committed in a particular community. So I believe that making sure that we keep that in there helps us be able to answer those questions and to be able to show empirically, not by just word of mouth, but through data collection, that we are not targeting or inappropriately dealing with people of color or dealing with people based off their economic status in our community. So I really believe that keeping the race on our forms is really important to how we do our job and be able to report that information back in such a way, in particular, so that sometimes that council have a platform to say, you know, we've asked for that information, they've given it back to us, and we don't see the disparities that potentially people are talking about.
Any questions of the chief?
Yes.
Fred, go ahead.
Although humans come in many colors,
He can't hear you.
oh, I can speak louder. I speak louder, Chief. Is the microphone that? Can we put a microphone right there? We could plug a microphone down there into right here.
He can hear you there, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Of the categories, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. Of the categories people can list for their race, do you know of any colors other than black and white that they can list? Any colors?
No, sir.
So the only humans that have to put down that color are the white people and black people. If you're from somewhere else, you can name your country. You can say, I'm Asian, I'm this, I'm that. But when it comes down to me, I have to put the color of my skin as my race. I'm opposed to that. And it's got to be something like Santa Claus. We know where he lives. We know the name of his reindeers. We know that his wife, Miss Claus, lived with him. But he does not exist. We can track him. We can tell how far he is from the North Pole. We know where his house is located. But there is no Santa Claus. That's what has happened to race. All of what we're saying about it is false. My race defines who I am. My ethnicity can tell you from whence I came, where my ancestors came. How did I get here? By way of my ancestors. But my race has to do with what I can do, my performance. It separates me. We don't have no bear race, no monkey race, no dog race. They're not in races, only humans. And we are put in this race because of our function, of what we can do, not because of our color, the color of our skin. And any human that can do what any other human can do is as much in the race as anybody else. And this is as a matter of fact, prior to slavery, the word never existed as pertained to humans. It never existed. It just evolved after slavery, so they could put my ancestors in this category to show that they were inferior to everybody else. People all over this nation marching, saying it's time to end racism. You can't end racism unless you end race.
Okay. Mr. Richardson, if you wouldn't mind, since we're really here to look at these forms and figure out what city departments use what, why don't we go through that before we start getting
Let's do
into,
it.
because we've heard a lot from you in the last 3 weeks about why we're doing this, and I think we all understand. But since we've got all the staff here, why don't we go through and at least find out what these forms ask for and why asking for it before we get into
All right.
exactly what we want to
Okay.
try to do to change. Chief? Okay, go ahead.
Chief, you mentioned that it's good information for the council staff when questioned, or for the community to also have as well. I appreciate that. Are there any federal oversights that the police department go through to look at statistics that involve racial demographics?
So annually, we submit reports to the FBI on our UCR data, and when we report that data to them, we have to report in race categories when we're doing our UCR reporting. Also, when we do our certification, our CALIA certification, it is an area they look at. If they're looking at it in the area of traffic citations, how many we write, they look at the demographics of the people we wrote traffic citations to based off the geographical area of the city of Mobile. And so they alert us to trends based off what they see in the data that we report back to them. And so many of the federal reports that we're required to provide back, race is a critical component to whether or not we're in compliance with what they're asking us to do, and it also is important to funding opportunities as it relates to whether they're going to provide funding to our agency.
And if forms that have the city seal on them, not the ones that are required to fill out for the other agencies, because we don't have oversight, would it make it more difficult to then transfer the information?
And that's the exact reason our forms, our internal forms mimic the state forms that we have. It just makes it easier for us to extrapolate the data back out of our databases by putting it in there that way without using a state form.
So it would be more time-consuming,
Yes, ma'am.
an extra piece of paperwork?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, Chief, you were saying that the categories that you have to put on these forms that are going to the federal government and look at the trends and whatnot, you say that they're asking for race. And for them to ask for race, do they mean black and white, or do they ask you to break it down into ethnicities?
They have black and white on
And
their
that's
form.
it?
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr. Daves?
Chief, it looks like to me the two forms we have in front of us that are police department forms are the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences Mobile Regional Laboratory form, which got the state's seal on it.
Yeah.
So this is a state form, right?
Yes.
And then there's another one here, Mobile Police Department Criminal History Request. And so this is a request for the Mobile Police Department to the state of Alabama for a criminal history. What is this form?
So a criminal history request form is really a form by which someone would come by MPD and ask to run a criminal history check on them, and we would basically run the criminal history check on there.
So this is like if Daves came to the police department and asked you to run a criminal history check on John Daves.
Correct.
And it asked for this information, one of which is race. And I guess you need that information in order to run it down?
Yes, sir. So John Smith can be black or white. And so when you're trying to get to the crux of who a person is, sometimes race helps as a determiner if you've got the right John Smith. You can have the right date of birth. You can have the same date of birth. Your social security numbers can be off maybe by one digit, but sometimes race gives you that added dynamic of being able to make the determination if you have the right Don Smith.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Richardson.
Chief, let's just assume now that council took race off the form and put ethnicity. So are you saying that if I put down there, instead of black, if I put down there African American, and when that got up to some other level of government, they wouldn't know who I am?
Right. Well, I was going to speak. One, the data entry would probably not be the same unless they change their forms to mimic what our forms are. So, I mean, unless what we do locally here becomes a national trend, I think that we shoot ourselves in the foot simply because we're reporting different demographic information in the same category. So if we're reporting just ethnicity and the federal government is asking for black and white, and when we're trying to upload the data, there will be no way for us to replicate the information that the federal government is asking for if we went to that process.
You've already made known to us that black and white are the two groups that put the race down. So if everybody else going to continue to put down who they claim they are. So now we're just dealing with whites and blacks. And if I say African American, that would be confusing to somebody.
Again, I mean, I can't speak to the federal level. I mean, I don't have the authority to tell them to change their forms. I do believe that the federal government is looking at police reform, but I don't know that from the perspective of changing their paperwork and changing race and ethnicity becomes a primary goal of theirs. And if we are reporting differently than what they are asking, it complicates our ability to make sure that we're giving them the information that they need in order to be in compliant with the things that they're asking to do on a local level.
Okay, this is what I want to ask you. Who are you sending this information to?
Usually we're sending it to the FBI or DOJ.
FBI, okay, hold on. And Department of Justice, okay. Is Chris not in here?
No, he couldn't come. He couldn't come.
Madam Clerk, I'd like for you to contact the FBI and office in Washington and the Department of Justice in Washington and ask them if the Mobile City Council changed its forms and moved race off it and put ethnicity in there and sent that information up there to them, would it be acceptable? And get the name, rank, phone number, so somebody gonna say you didn't do it. Document who you talked to, and anybody wanna verify it, let them go. Thank you.
Chief, do y'all have just a specific way of transfer information from here to the federal government or to the state? I mean, you don't have somebody going through each one and checking off and transfer. It should be some sort of fairly easy.
Yes, ma'am. In our RMS system, reports management system, because race is one of the categories in our RMS system, we're able to extrapolate that data and transfer it to those agencies simply because it's been uploaded properly.
So if our form changed to any number of ethnicities, you'd have to have somebody actually go through, look at each one in order to transfer it into some database of the federal government that only requires black or white.
Correct.
Are these the only forms that you all use, the ones that you gave us?
There should be a number of others. I don't know if, but I do have a set with me that I can provide to you guys.
Yeah, because I think there were some questions about when someone is stopped and information is filled out on suspects and things like that.
I have them, and I'll turn them over to the clerk.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any other questions of the chief?
I just have,
Joel?
this is probably not you, but one of the forms in front of us is City of Mobile alcoholic beverage application. Is that a police form or someone else's form?
No, I think that's
Revenue,
yeah,
okay.
Revenue.
Thank you, Chief.
All right. Well, speaking of revenue, since you raise your hand, if you'd like to go next. Revenue?
Madam Clerk, while she's going up there, there's one of these forms is a CPAT intake form.
That's under fire department.
Fire department, okay.
That's what.
That's fire
You
department.
got more forms than cars got built, brother.
It says fire, it's
Yeah.
like tire.
Yeah. You can come down here. I think it's all right if you come down here or whatever, I guess.
I'm fine if you can hear me.
Tell her
Okay.
to refer to what.
It's hard to see.
Yeah, it's just hard to see you, that's all.
There's no light up there.
Is this the loan program? Which form are we looking at that you submitted? You need to.
Jenny.
This is revenue. This is
The micro loan? or-
Well, hey,
I'll
Gwen.
call it
See, I didn't know that was
beverage.
you, Gwen.
I'll call it beverage application.
Yeah, which form is it that we're looking for?
Alcoholic
You said
beverage
the
application.
alcohol beverage form,
Oh, okay.
and I think it's on page 5 and 6 of that form.
Yeah, my question would
That
be,
package.
if you don't mind, Madam Chairwoman, if I could go ahead and ask my question.
Go ahead, Joel.
On page 5 of the form, it asks for the race. And page 6 does also. This is the owners. And I get, the question I have, why do we ask for that information?
We just copied that information from the same information we get from the state. Actually, the state has to fill out their information, and they send it to us, and then we just duplicate it, so we don't use it for anything.
We can't control what the state asks for. So all you're doing is putting, so does your department fill out the owner's information sheet?
So the owners fill out that sheet themselves.
But the owner's got to fill out the race section on the sheet.
They do, it's there. Sometimes they fill it out, and sometimes they don't, but we don't use it
We don't
for
care
anything
it. We don't
else.
care whether they
don't
fill it
care.
out or not. So we wouldn't really need to even ask that question. As
Right.
as far as City Mobile is concerned.
According to the ordinance, no. It's not any information we're doing because of the ordinance.
And then you don't have to send this information then to the state?
I believe we get that information, but again, it's not being utilized for anything.
So the state doesn't necessarily need it either, apparently.
No, not from us.
Not from
They
us.
have another packet that they fill out themselves
A whole
for the
separate
state.
packet from the
Yes.
state? Okay. So
There's no
this looks
need.
like a document where we could take that entire item off.
I believe so. I didn't raise my hand saying.
I thought you did raise your hand.
No.
How many of these forms, though, do you have left in, I mean, if we took
We
race.
actually have the form electronically,
It's
and we
electronic?
don't produce it until we need to use it.
Oh, okay, all right,
So it
okay.
could be altered.
So it could just be altered very easily. Oh, okay. All right, any other questions?
No.
All right, thanks, Glenn, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
We can put this one in one stack.
All right, that's,
All right, who's next? Chief Seeley? I see you sitting there, so I was going to call on you.
Oh, good gracious, Joe.
I think the only thing that has an impact on us it would be from a recruiting aspect, where we I think Councilman Daves mentioned our CPAT intake form, where we're able to gather that information where we can, as we recruit, and we can look back at who were successful and who was not during the CPAT. We can remember who those individuals and work with them, and which we do all of them. So that's really the only extent. We do have federal from grants and things like that where we have to be able to. We don't have to necessarily show the numbers, but if they ask, we need to be able to say that we're following protocols and doing the right things as an organization. So, any questions for me?
on the BOLO one, the fire marshal, it has our, so it comes from us, but is this more of a state initiative?
I don't know. I'm speaking for our fire investigators who are more law enforcement. So I think that's more in line with a law enforcement type question.
It says Mobile Fire Rescue Department. That's what I
Yeah,
thought
well,
it
this one
was.
has complexion on there, it doesn't, unless I'm just not, yeah. Oh, it does have race, it says
Yes,
sex, race, and then down below, build and gate. it has
Well,
complexion.
it's like making a wanted poster for someone who's wanted for arson.
Yeah, that's a warrant.
Right.
That's-
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, well,
But on federal, on their posters, they don't have nothing about race on it.
guys use? Yeah, that GPT is saying that's the same form that police use. And that's our fire investigators have law enforcement credentials. So they're using the same form that law enforcement uses.
Okay.
The wanted poster in the postal service from the FBI, there's nothing about race on it. with race is not on it. They got a picture of who they're looking for. If you can't figure out who that is, sorry for you. They don't use that.
As far as law enforcement, though, is this a state, federal guideline? How it's used, Chief? On the BOLO?
That is not a state or federal guideline, but when we put the BOLO out, we often list, if we're looking for somebody, and Councilman Richards contested this before, well, it's okay when you guys put race on there when you're looking for them, not okay once you get, you take them into custody, because you've got them in custody, you're no longer looking for them. And so the race is put on there simply as an identifier for the individual that we're looking for.
Are you telling that, from your perspective, both chiefs, that race needs to be on here because of your department's ability to do your jobs?
I believe race needs to remain on the form simply from the perspective someone can be extremely light pigment and classify themselves as being black. And so race needs to be on there based off what our historical information that we may have in our database about that individual.
Because it's also got complexion down at the bottom.
Say again, I didn't hear
It
you.
also has complexion down at the bottom, so it could be like a better descriptor
It
or
could be,
description.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's shredded also. It's a protected document.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Richardson?
again, if I was from Bangladesh and I committed a crime and I'm at large, what race would you put down? It's discriminatory. You're only aiming at white and black people when you got people in this city for every nation in the world. But you're just aiming at, are you black or are you white? But, so, I say again, it's a spot over to the right for the picture of the person. I know who you're looking for. I got a picture of him. So you got to come down here again and try to. If you put the height, weight, all of that, I ain't got nothing against it. What I said, what I complained to you all about, is when you arrest a person and carry them to jail. Said we arrested a black person and carried him to jail. I said can't help nobody. You already got him. If the person is at large, then you can describe the person then. But it's too late to describe the person when you already got him in handcuffs and behind bars. It's not helping anybody. You're just trying to alert you're going beyond the Call of Duty. You're trying to tell the citizens something else now. And the same thing is happening here.
But this is before they're trying to arrest this individual. So they're trying to get a description, and it's restricted information if you look at the bottom. It's only for law enforcement, and it's to be shredded once, I guess, the person has been arrested.
But I'm from Bangladesh, Bass. What you gonna put?
I don't think they would necessarily,
They're not interested in
they're
nobody from Bangladesh.
interested in a physical description.
Yeah, because that complexion, then they've got comments, so I guess if you need more
Everybody got a complexion.
description. But you're telling us that it needs to stay this way because of what it takes for you all to do your job in order to arrest somebody based on what they look like. And then once you get them in custody, then no longer this sort of description is needed.
It's an internal
Internal.
form, and it is used for the sole purpose of alerting other law enforcement officers and other law enforcement agencies of who we're looking for. Once that person is taken into custody, the BOLO is canceled, and it is no longer something that is circulated.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
one of the reasons that the law enforcement forms have these different fields is that when we upload into the Alabama Criminal Justice Information System or into the National Criminal Justice Information System, they're very specific on what categories of information we're uploading to. They're standardized because they're used by all the law enforcement agencies at the local, federal, and state levels in our country, not just in Mobile, Alabama. So that's why you see that information collected because it does have to be reported through the state system as well as the national system. And there's others as far as our base reporting systems. They ask questions about race, questions about ethnicity, country of origin, so all of those. And just like you pointed out, to even help us on the lookout is to describe not just black male, but light skin, black male skin, medium skin, and so that it just helps us narrow when we are looking for somebody. But the data has to be collected for our reporting system as we report crime so that it's uniform throughout our country.
All right. And then Chief Seeley, you were talking about the CPAT intake forms, that's for your recruiting?
I'm sorry?
The CPAT intake form, just for recruiting
Which
purposes?
helps us for recruiting purposes, so we can hire and we're working with individuals that's, I don't think it has a negative impact on our operations, but it's something that makes it easier for us as a recruiting tool.
Well, on the back, it's got ethnicity, and it lists down a number of...
Right. So, like I said, I don't think that would affect us operationally.
But Chief, if we just put ethnicity to that, wouldn't you still know?
I think so, yes.
That's all I'm saying. Chief.
And I didn't mean to throw the question before on Chief Batiste.
Yeah, I
but
understand.
we only have 2 of our fire investigators that use that form, and they're law enforcement trained, so I'm not very familiar with the information that they use.
Okay. Any other questions of Chief Seeley? Anybody? All right. Because we got the checklist and these other forms. Any other
So for
questions?
Parks and Recreation, they're not, Shonda's not here, so I was going to
Okay.
speak. I think you have a few forms from Parks and Recreation, and so I'll just run through those real quickly. There's an internal form. It's just a participation information form. One of the things that I think we're probably Flo can speak to better is how race and ethnicity is defined at the federal level, which really then generally flows down to state and then should be consistent at the state and then local level. That's what Director Barber was talking about. So there's consistency in reporting that information all the way up for purposes of, grants or other, types of requirements that the state and federal level may have. The state is consistent. The state forms that you'll see for the Parks and Rec is consistent with the federal definition that's used in the 2010 census, I think, with race and ethnicity. Race being defined in kind of these, I think, 5 or 6 categories, and ethnicity just is Hispanic or non-Hispanic. And the state form that you see there from the Parks and Rec has that on there, and that state form is used for services that are provided for senior services that are within our Parks and Recs department.
This is the Alabama Department of Senior Services.
That's right.
Participant enrollment form.
And that's a form that we use for participation enrollment for Title III services, and they, in my opinion, properly define race and ethnicity consistently with how the federal government defines it according to the most recent census, 2010 census, and I think continue to do it in the 2020 flow. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe that that distinction started in 2003, but if I could just add quickly to what Jim is saying, this is what you've already heard from Leslie Ray, and what you will be hearing or have heard from Rebecca. So much of what the city does relates to federal grant applications and federal grant reporting. So there are 2 steps in the process dealing with federal grants, the application and then also the reporting to show that the targeted population received the benefits that were awarded. And those all consistently use the categories that you've heard also Director Barber talk about. There are the 5 categories of race. It's actually white, black, or African American, Asian, American Indian and Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. Those are the 5 categories that were established years ago by the federal government. That's what race is defined as, and ethnicity is defined as either Hispanic or non-Hispanic, and that you'll just hear that from one department after another.
Yeah. So within that context, to just close out on the forms that Parks and Rec uses, that form, which is a state form they use to gain funding support for for senior services, they list those same categories as defined by flow. There are two other, so our form, the participant information form, actually is not consistent with that. It lists same categories, but they use the term ethnicity. So that was, whether it was a form we created, so probably that either should be corrected to just say race to be consistent or ethnicity. A lot of people use them interchangeably, but I think what we're trying to define is that should be a standard. So that probably needs to be corrected and have that say race if we want to be consistent.
Yeah, and the categories are slightly different.
Very slightly.
This form and this form.
That's
They
right.
probably ought to line up.
Yeah, they generally line up. They're just slightly different, but and again, our form should be consistent with that opinion.
Yeah, right.
So that would need to be corrected. We also use the HR form was already talked about. We use that HR form for our participants and hires. That just gets passed on to HR. And then our recreation desk program, which is a program we use for making reservations and participating in activities. We now have all personnel that are using parks and recreation services log into the rec desk program. That allows us to track the individuals. They sign up. It's like in any parks program where you can know who's there and who's using it. They also ask in that form for ethnicity and race. It doesn't give the subcategories listed there in the printout of the form that we have, but there may be drop-down menus in there. I didn't have that in there. Again, that's I don't know specifically. My guess is that's just to have some metric to know the spectrum in which we have people utilizing our facilities. So that's within the Public Works Directorate. We don't have any other specific forms that we use that would identify race or ethnicity. Any other form we use would be a form that's already been described by HR. But I will say, in a lot of our grant applications for federal funds, state and federal funds for construction projects, for example, the Tiger grant for the Broad Street. Those grant applications usually ask for that kind of data. And I'll let the grants department or Rebecca talk to that more specifically. So what we have for forms within Public Works.
So you're saying that maybe we should do is use the breakdown on the title,
That's right.
which is the back, that we have the back, and use that for the front page.
That's right. I think our form should match the state form. It's close, but it was not exactly the same. And so, if anything, I think this discussion pointed out that discrepancy, and I think we should be consistent one way or the other.
And that would be only for senior programs, correct?
That's right, currently. And we were not tracking that before. And I wish Shonda were here, because she talked to me specifically about the fact that prior to coming here, we weren't tracking that data, and it is required, and you can gain additional resources and benefits by tracking that data.
Okay, but I have a question about this one. It looks very homemade, and it says the rec desk.
Right.
I mean,
I
so-
talked to that one. That's a computer system.
Right, but is that somebody taking the information that is the employee and then the end user gets this form? I'm not sure who fills this one out.
Yeah, at best I know, that's for individuals when they come to participate and use the thing, they log into the rec desk program, and so they get in there. There's probably drop downs on that when you go, because it just says race and ethnicity. It does not show the little drop down
Right.
examples.
And that's important to get their race and ethnicity
I don't-
for which purpose? I mean, this is somebody who goes and takes a knitting, say, class, I'm guessing, correct? Like in one of our centers that's not a senior center, but just a community center. So what would be, who's tracking that you need that? I'm not to make it difficult for you, I just want to.
No, it's not making it difficult. I think it was just it's a default part of that program that they have it in there, and it's probably generally used throughout. This program is a kind of an enterprise program used actually throughout many Parks and Rec programs throughout
So
the...
nobody looks at those statistics, and it doesn't give grants or answer people's questions about who utilizes the centers? So
No, I would have to check with the Parks and Rec Senior Director to see if that information is used to then give a breakdown of percentages of population that are using the services that we provide. That could likely be a question or something that they would be asked.
Okay. I mean, I understand the seniors because you have the sales center and all kinds of things from SARSB and stuff that they depend on the number of people that are economically or socially considered,
That's right.
a special class. So, okay, thanks.
Okay. Rebecca, you want to? Okay.
Your ears were ringing.
That's right. So, Rebecca Christian, I supervise the accounting, treasury, and grants administration functions. We don't have any forms directly in my areas that we use to collect race. What we use is the race information that is collected from some of the other departments that you've heard from to do the reporting and compliance for primarily federal awards. So we, at the initial application stage and when we accept a federal grant agreement, there's a whole list of boilerplate certifications that we have to make in order to accept the grant agreement, and that would be that we're agreeing to comply with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which specifically lists race as a protected class. We also agree to be an equal opportunity employer, which is the purpose of human resources collection of that information for employment. For procurement under federal awards, we have to agree to take certain actions, positive affirmative actions to for minority disadvantaged businesses, and I'm sure Keisha or Don will to the procurement aspects of that. So a lot of the collection for those specific areas are driven in order to prove compliance with the federal awards and assure them that we've met those certifications for those protected classes. For the Parks and Recs department in particular, you just heard that they collect that for their senior center, for their sale participants. That's a federal award, and they have to prove that the beneficiaries of that program are one of the protected classes of people, and that's the purpose of collecting it them. Jamie Roberts' program, many of the eligibility determinations for who can receive benefits from CDBG, ESG, and home are driven by both race and economic levels. So those are questions that they ask for. And so what my area primarily does is assures that all of the things that we're saying that we're going to do, we actually do. So while I don't have any forms in particular, I'm generally the policeman of some of the other departments to make sure that we're doing what we say we do. So,
All right. Any questions, Mr.
Yes.
Richardson?
Rebecca, let's just say that you had to report to HUD a breakdown of African Americans, whites, whatever, however. But if it came to you, they don't want to see every form you
no, sir.
receive. They
They
just
do not.
want to get the information. If it came to you in the form of ethnicity, where a person listed African American as their ethnicity, now you're getting ready to send something to HUD. Couldn't you
We would have to change it to one of the
Right,
categories that the federal government
That's
uses.
all you'd have to do. So this is not, you don't need no E equal to MC squared. This is no complicated formula. You just give it to them, give them what they want. You got it in front of you. So You don't have to send up to them every form you got. You got all of these forms. You can read it for yourself. It says African American. You put if they're looking for black, then you just put this how many blacks I have. Do you see
I completely understand your point. I think the concern may be that if we have to have a staff person then translate the categories that we're
That's
using
all
to
I'm
the
saying.
federal government, it might require some additional administrative overhead. I think Jamie could probably speak a little bit to that. Part of his department's duties are to actually go into it's an online system that HUD uses to do both the financial and the eligibility reporting, and they have certain categories that are standard that Jamie's staff uses to do the eligibility reporting on that. So I'm sure he could tell you exactly what those categories, the options are, but it would require somebody to translate our form box is actually needing to be this on a federal form kind of thing. But
right?
right.
Okay. Well, I agree with that.
Thanks, Rebecca. Jamie?
Thank you.
Hey, I'll jump in on that a second. I've got the history of the definition of race and ethnicity from the federal government. So it's OMB Directive 15 is actually what defines race and ethnicity. It's the race and ethnic standards for federal statistics and administrative reporting. So they tried to standardize so everybody's using the same definitions more or less. That's from 1977, updated in 1997. There's a multi-year, a bunch of statisticians looking at it basically update. And that's the revisions to the standards for the classifications of federal data on race and ethnicity. And by 2003, it was mandated that most federal programs are required to use those two definitions of what is race and what is ethnicity. Race being the 5 races of white, American Indian or Alaska Native, which is 1, Asian, Black or African American, and then Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. You can use more, but those are the 5 that are required at minimum. Ethnicity is a separate question. It's Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino. It's a binary yes, no. HUD's reporting systems, integrated disbursement information system, IDIS for short. That's what we have to go in almost every day to report on any beneficiary data. So if anybody gets $1 out, whether it's the developer or beneficiary housing assistance, we get demographic information on which includes race, which is the 5 races, and ethnicity separately on each person. We're required by that mandate through 24 CFR Part 1, which is the Section 24 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 1. So we're required to back to HUD certain demographic information. That's one of them. Like I said, when we go when the HUD system, it's asking for all those, and that's the information required. At the end of the year, the other report that Rebecca was talking about is the CAPE report. It's the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. They're asking for all that again. So we have to get all of the information we put in the system and pull it out and give HUD another copy of a full report at the end of the year. That's an annual, ongoing cycle. We're constantly doing that. We're actually in the middle of ours right now for this last year. All of our applications for assistance have that question. All of our developer closeout documents have that question. Our MBE documents, we wouldn't be able to certify our MBE reports unless we ask that question. Whether it's a woman-owned business or minority-owned business, those qualify. Any direct complaints about fair housing, we wouldn't be able to start the conversation in most cases without asking race. We have contracts with the Fair Housing Office usually. We have contracts with legal services usually. They report back to us on that kind of stuff. In the homeless grant, there's a CSV file requirement that we export out of the SAGE, it's into the SAGE report system, out of the continuing care system. So we get that, and it's got predefined related information. We can't change those, and that just goes right in the Census system. It's coming from the continuum of care housing first as the administrator for that, coming to us, HUD. And if a field is left blank, it's not because we didn't ask, it's because the respondent chose not to answer, which is perfectly fine, but we have to ask because of the federal regulations. All of our contracts have some kind of anti-discrimination clause in them, and they all specify race because of the Civil Rights Act. Let's see. And then on the municipal enforcement side, we have municipal offense ticket that municipal court has that's their form. We can't do anything about that either. So more or less all the HUD-related things.
All right, any questions,
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Jim, when you collect all this information, do you send all that to the HUD in one document?
It's different versions. They do on-site monitoring of us.
But no. So, you said what they require to, what you required to send to HUD. You're not sending HUD no 1,000 pages,
It's about 400 pages.
but all of it ain't all not about race.
That's one piece of the data
That's
in the
all.
document. Right.
That's exactly right. It's one piece of all of that data you put it.
That's
in.
just the demographic piece that's captured to the
That's
process.
exactly right. And if you received it, with those 5 categories as ethnicity, and then you got ready to transport it over to the federal document, you would have a problem with that.
They would have a problem with that when they come and audit us and they look at the file and they're confused by what that means.
No, but I'm saying you're going to translate and transport from the form you collected on and put it on the form you're going to send to them. You can't.
So we could do that. Their system specifically says race, and so
I understand,
it's
but I'm
semantics at that
saying
point.
when you put it up there, you can put it under race.
It's semantics at that point. Well, we could label it ethnicity on internal documents, but they're going to come and audit us because they annually audit us on site, and they're going to ask, what's the point of that, basically?
They can see what it is.
They'll first off be confused because that doesn't meet their definition of ethnicity, because theirs is a different. They'll probably question our competency for administering the grant with different definitions.
Okay. What? That's HUD. Are you speaking about HUD?
Yes.
Madam Clerk, I want you to contact HUD also. Okay, we'll find out from HUD.
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
I would object. The federal government requires we collect the data in a certain way. They've said what race means. They've said what ethnicity means. We need to collect it the way they have directed that we collect it. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Mr. Manzi, go ahead. Can you turn on your mic? We can't hear you. May not have one.
I want to make sure that I heard commentary from Mr. Roberts correctly. Is it your opinion, or would you state to us that if we didn't collect the data that we were presently collecting, that we would be running a rush to potentially getting grants, or they would come down and have the opinion that we would not be competently dealing with the grants that they offer to us?
Yeah, just like any other definition or clause they have in their requirements, if we use a different definition or a different process, they're going to at least look at us odd and dig deeper and try to find something, see what's going on.
They're not renowned for their flexibility, are they?
No. Federal government in general, HUD specifically, no.
So just hypothetically, if this is put in place, how would your department respond? If the demographics is out, then you'll respond in what way?
Well, in which way? Are you saying race is excluded completely or race has changed to ethnicity?
Proposal is passed, then you will, in order to gather the information you need, you will do what?
I'd probably have to go to Atlanta and Birmingham and maybe DC to explain to them what's going on, because there's not a state director right now, and so we're getting directed by Atlanta, the Georgia office. And so it'd be a combination of meetings, and then anytime our representative changed from HUD, because they cycle them around so nobody's comfortable at any given time, we'd have to explain it again and hope they see that that's the only thing we're not using their definition on.
Jamie, before you go, just real quick too, what I'm hearing is that you have to mirror those other forms for the resources and for the information that they require.
Right, yeah, we have about $3.5, $4 million a year we get, and then with CARES Act, we have an additional $3.5 million we're looking at.
And, yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon. You have a microenterprise loan program form that's in front of you. And that particular program is funded through our Housing and Community Development, our HUD funds. And those funds go to low to moderate income business owners, or those that are starting businesses in the construction field, or those fields that are similar related to construction. And on that application, because we do enter this information into the HUD system that Jamie was describing to you all, we do have race/ethnicity listed there with all of those subtitles that he asked for. And those actually have to go into the HUD system before we can approve those actual loans, which turn into grants. Also, with our DBE program, the city, through the Wave Transit System, the city of Mobile is a part of the Alabama Department of Transportation Unified Certification Program. That application is on our website, our Work with City of Mobile website, to assist those businesses who wish to be certified in collecting their information and documentation for this certification. For the actual individual prime owner of the company, that particular application does ask for race and gender. And that's to show who controls that company.
Madam Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Chairwoman. I'm looking, we've had a lot of discussion today about the 5 categories that the federal government has set out there. And so if you were someone from India, you would say you would the Asian category.
Yes.
And if you were an American Indian or Alaskan Native, you would pick that category. If you were from the Pacific, you would pick out that category.
Correct.
And in some cases, like the state form from Alabama, they also have a block for other. So if it's not listed, if you're from the Middle East, you might put other and put
So the
different
1997 statisticians report is basically a combination of color, country of origin, and heritage. So it has the definition of all of those, what they mean. Middle Eastern actually is white in their analysis.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir, go ahead.
the categories on which Councilmember Daves is referring to, the list is either a country or a continent. It's either a country or a continent. I have both of them. I live in a country and I'm in a continent. I'm the only people in this nation. None of these people have to mention that about the color of their skin. None of them. And if my people had not been put in slavery, I would not have had to do that too, either. The day come and gone, it's time to end that. Why can't I be just like all of these other people who came here from China, from Vietnam, from Korea, from Japan? They just say I'm Japanese. And the Census would take it. HUD would take it. All those organizations you're talking about would take it. So you're saying, but for Fred, we got to let the color of his skin. That day is coming on. It has to start somewhere.
Well, in this instance, it's going to have to start with the federal government.
No. I said it does not have to start with the federal government. I said we can be example to the whole federal government and the rest of them. We can be an example. You have not had to go through with what I've had to go through with. The time to end that is now. And you all can join and be heroes to join and put the end to this. to make people put down the color of their skin. The only reason they had us to put the color of skin down was for abuse, to know who to abuse or who to deny. One nation treat everybody the same. Okay, so I don't mind putting the color of my skin, but have everybody else to put the color. Everybody got a skin color. Let everybody put the color of the skin down. Let's rock and roll. No, I just want to color your skin. I'm not trying to get the color of nobody else's skin. I think it's time to end that. That in itself is abuse. I say the day has come and gone for that. And I would like to see the council rise above what our ancestors of the past created, the road they created for us to go down. I think it's time to end that and go down a whole different road.
All right.
I think we found one form.
Yeah, we found at least one form that we know we can change. Archanique, did you have anything else? Any other questions of Ms. Kidd while she's here? Thank you. Who else? Scott, did you want to, or anybody else here to speak about any of the forms that we need to?
He come to the,
Yeah, can you come down the mic, Scott, so we can just hear you?
My only concern was just making note to everybody is any effects that it could have on some of the data reporting or how data gets sent to these agencies on the IT side, software changes. Can't really answer that because I'm not sure what all you are going to impose. But I'm just saying there could be some challenges there. Just need to be aware of, especially if you're talking about timelines. So just be aware of that. That's all.
The one thing, we might as well just horn in on this. This is the alcohol beverage, okay? And it's internal to the city. It mentions race, but the person who...
Was that revenues? Was that Gwen's?
Yes.
Yeah, I just asked her a minute ago. She said it doesn't...
Would that be a very difficult one to...
On that particular one, I asked her just now, and she said, no, that doesn't. It would not. It is not. It's not.
I didn't think so, but I wanted to hear both in concert.
Yeah.
So if there's a recommendation, I wouldn't want to do one that throws IT into a dither.
Madam Chairman, the form you're referring to comes to the police department so that they can run criminal history on those applicants. And so it does become important to us as an identifying characteristic of the individual filing for the...
Can you get the state forms instead? Can you request state?
No, it's a data entry into the state system. So we're entering the data off of that form into their...
From the alcohol beverage?
Yes, to run the background. So it goes into a state criminal investigation. The two databases I was telling you is the Alabama Criminal Justice Information System and the National Criminal Justice Information System. So we have to...
The ABC does own thing and get, okay, so this is one that has to also reflect the information.
Correct, and again, so that we can enter the proper data for the identifying characteristics.
I thought I understood that that was not the case on this particular information. I thought it was more internal.
Well, for Gwen's department, yes, but apparently when it goes to police, for them to run the...
Yeah, but I didn't know if they got the state forms, is what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
I guess I thought that you could just do it from...
Well,
the
we'll
state.
run the criminal histories, and then we'll...
That would be great. Okay.
All right.
I get what you're saying.
We had one or two others who are on our list.
In our packets.
In our list.
Good afternoon, council members. Bucky Thomas, municipal judge. Good to see y'all again.
You're here for Judge Whitwin?
Judge Whitwin, as well as Miss Debbie McGowan.
Okay.
She's also
Right.
here. And I'm not sure, I believe you said that Judge Whitwin is going to get you the forms or has submitted the forms?
Well, he sent us a copy of the questionnaire,
Okay.
that's going out to all the judges.
Okay. I can say, for identification purposes, as far as I'm concerned as a judge, when it comes to, I think we all should be concerned with this, getting the right person in the courtroom. Now, of course, that starts with law enforcement upon an arrest, but as far as any function of race on a form when the person is in the courtroom themselves, I see no reason, I see no function for having, James Smith, black male, on any order within the courtroom, because at that point we have identified the person that is to be brought to court at that time. Now, where it does get tricky is, let's say that, I'm going to use a common name, let's say that a Fred Richardson doesn't show up to court, and me as a judge issues an alias writ. Well, it goes out to these police officers that are out patrolling. They're going to want to know, is it Fred Richardson pulling over? What identifier can I use? That's where it can be tricky, because if Councilman Richardson, if you were driving along, if there's a white Fred Richardson that has that warrant that was issued by this court, you certainly wouldn't want to be booked into jail on that Fred Richardson's warrant.
Right, but I don't look like all black people either.
Understandably.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, for purpose of in-court forms, the orders that we issue, there's really no need for it, because at that point the individual has been identified and has been brought to court and has gone through the process. I will tell you, the first time that I encounter someone upon their arrest is at bond hearings, and I'm fortunate enough to do two of the three bond hearings that the city conducts, and they're conducted over the TV from the jail. And I can tell you, when I'm going through the docket, if I say James Smith, that James Smith comes up to the speaker, and then I make sure that we got the correct James Smith by saying, "Are you James Smith?" And I usually go by the date of birth that's been provided for me. So again, after they have gone through the booking process, or as the function of the court in doing bond hearings and actually conducting the trials and dispositions themselves, and I believe I answered this in the form that was sent out, it doesn't matter if it says black, it doesn't matter if it says white, it doesn't matter if it's blank, because at that point in time we've identified that person as to whom they are. Again, the only concern I have is for capious warrants and for warrant for failure to appear, which are called alias warrants. I think there does need to be an identifier on those, because what concerns me is, again, getting the right person. The last thing I want as a judge, and I think the last thing as the judiciary or law enforcement or anybody, is to haul somebody to jail with a very common name. Because, and I'll be honest with you, I have the pleasure of actually practicing law as well, because I'm a part-time judge, and primarily what I do is criminal defense. And it's my worst fear to have James Smith, black male, taken to jail when it's James Smith, white male, that has the alias warrant. Because oftentimes, I will tell you, when they are pulled over by law enforcement, it's been my experience as a defense attorney, and quite honestly as a judge, that if they know they have a warrant, they will often give a false name, and certainly a different social security number, or date of birth, has been my experience. So I think for that purposes, an identifier has to be there, but for in-court purposes, there is no need for an identifier, because at that point in time we have them in court. And the only time you'll see that for in-court purposes is on our orders that we issue. It will have their name, and I believe it does list now, Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, Jane Smith, white female or black female. At that point, there's no need for an identifier in court, because we know that we have the correct person there.
No. Madam Chairman, Judge, it's only two classes of people in this city that we are aiming at. That's white and black. We're not aiming at anybody else, because they don't have to put down the color of their skin. But if let's just say the council voted in that we're going to replace race with ethnicity, and the whites put the Caucasians, and the blacks put down African American, would you be thrown off if they came to the bench and they had up the African American mayor? Would that throw you off?
No, sir, it would not. But from a legal perspective, you can have white African Americans They can be, you can be white and be from African American. There are countries.
But we're not dealing with color anymore. I'm saying if we
Exactly.
go with ethnicity, we threw it, we dropped color.
Yes, sir.
You can have, I don't disagree with that, but we're dropping color.
Yes, sir.
And if the whites put down Caucasian,
Yes, sir.
and the African Americans put down, I don't care what color they are. It's up to them to put down their ethnicity. They put down African American. Would that throw you?
Not me personally, no, sir.
Okay, that's all we're aiming at.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to follow up a little on what Judge Thomas just said in regards to some of our forms. I think you probably already have a number of our municipal court forms that do indicate race. And as he mentioned, the arrest warrants, the capious warrant, alias warrant, I think it's extremely important that what we have as the identifier is consistent with what Mobile PD and Police Department has, because these warrants then in turn go to the police department. So it is extremely important that those identifiers remain consistent. So our forms would need to coincide with whatever MPD does as far as those. As far as the court orders, they are generated internally. They're computer generated, so we could modify those at ease. We have a number of other state-generated forms that we pre-order, such as the contempt citations, the appeal bonds, and the alias and capious warrants. So those we do order, and they're ordered in bulk stock. So we would need a couple of weeks to get new forms in. But again, the identifiers are extremely important. I know Chief Batiste has touched on that. Judge Thomas touched on that. And we oftentimes in municipal court, as well as the entire court system, see people with same or similar names. Amazingly enough, in practicing law for a number of years, people with almost same birth date and same name. So as many identifying factors as we can have for this in the court system, the better.
Would you say that black is an identifying factor?
Councilman Richardson, it can be if you have somebody with the same name. If you have John Smith, multiple John Smiths, and I can assure you, I can probably go right now, plug into our case management system, and if I typed in John Smith, there would be a number of people pop up, a number of names. So that's where all the identifiers become extremely important. Dates of birth, social security numbers, we're probably going to see people of, several.
The only thing I'm saying to that,
of one race.
there are more than 100,000 black people in this city.
Yes, sir.
So if you're trying to find one person, and that word black is not going to lead you to know one person, it might lead you to 100,000 people. You got to get more information than the color of their skin out who it really is.
I do agree with that, but where it could be important is if Mobile police officers pulled over somebody, John Smith, and they run their information, an arrest warrant pops up. If this is black or African American John Smith, but the arrest indicates, or the warrant indicates a white John Smith, that would be important information for them to have, along with all the other identifying information.
We got two categories. We got Caucasian. If it's a Caucasian John Smith or African American John Smith, I believe the police officers, I don't think they're that stupid. I believe they can figure out. If it's an African American, I think they can figure out what that means.
I agree with you. I also think that what municipal court will need the same category of identifiers
And it will,
as
because we're going to pass
the
the law.
police department.
Yeah, the law, if we pass the law, it's going to be for all over the city in every department. We're not passing nothing for one department. It's for everybody. Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think, Gwen, did you have something else?
Yes.
Okay.
I did double check Revenue don't use that form for anything that has the black classification or the race classification, but that is the form that goes to the police department. So they may be using it, I don't know.
Obviously, it says he does.
Okay.
I was hoping they got the state paperwork. Then we could reduce it here. Yeah.
No, wait a minute, hold on, you've confused me now. We're talking about this form right here.
ABC board form, correct.
Okay.
That packet goes to the police department.
Who collects this information?
We do. The revenue department does.
Okay, take me through the process. Someone wants a liquor license. What do
They go
do?
to the ABC board first. They have to fill out some documentation there. But then they also come to the city of Mobile because they need to get approval through the city council. So my office fill out a packet and collect a bunch of data for the city of Mobile.
And then,
They have to send some information to the police department so they can do a background check.
So you collect this information, and you send it to the police department. You collect this information, it goes to the police department. So when the police department does their background checks, they're using the information you supply, not the information that the state supplies.
That's correct.
I
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chairman, just before we close, I'm going to have to leave. I just wanted y'all to understand that we collect the data in the way that we enter the data into the state and federal system. So we don't have that kind of discretion.
So, I think what some people maybe are thinking is that you can collect in a different way, and then you can have someone transcribe it into the state and federal entry forms. We take extra administrative work, and as Scott had said, probably will be a real challenge for the system here, for our computer systems here. And there was something else.
Yeah, well, I think that also, I think also it doing that would impair the validity of the information.
Yes.
Well, and I also heard Jamie Roberts talk about how he would have to go to Atlanta or somewhere else and explain to HUD what we're doing. It sounds like there's a lot more to it than maybe we initially thought. Will y'all take questions or statements from citizens who are here today?
Sure.
All right,
I'd
if
be
you want to come
delighted
down to the microphone.
Before she comes, I think that's the impression, is the timeline involved in changing the information that still has to be put in to give the other departments.
Well, but we haven't gotten all the information yet.
I'm being talked to by 3 or 4 people at the same time.
Yeah, hang on. We haven't gotten all the information yet. Chief Batiste was going to give us some forms, I think, that his officers may use on stops. And then we're still going to get all the answers from municipal courts. So we haven't gotten all the information
No,
yet.
and I do have a statement to make or a request at the end of the meeting.
At the end? Oh, okay, all right. Yes, ma'am, go ahead. If you'll give us your name and address.
My name is Betty Shin.
Oh, hey,
and
Betty.
I live at 36 McPhillips Avenue in Mobile, Alabama. Need my zip code?
Sure.
36604. And I'm going to read just a brief thing. I started off writing my niece today on social media, and I want to address this body. I'm telling my niece, I say, once a black person is pulled over, there is no negotiation. Asking for a badge number or the police chief, citing your relationship with the mayor, none of these things matter. What matters is for blacks is living to fight another day. Our black skin clearly is viewed as a threat. Most recently, George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks shows us that. Individually and collectively, we must be strategic, logical, and realistic in encounters with law enforcement. Staying alive during and after any and every encounter with law enforcement is for blacks should and must be our highest priority. Frankly, I see things getting even worse before they get better. Only time will tell. I, for one, am determined to be relentless in protest and agitation until there is change. I'm here because a lone black council member correctly claiming we are all members of the human race, demanding any and all references to race be removed from city docs forms. This is an absurdity, as Donald Trump headed to Mobile, Alabama with Stephen Miller to campaign against Sessions. We have bigger fish to fry. White privilege is real. Black Lives Matter is more than a slogan. It is reality that people who are honest and politically aware are cognizant of. My spirit will not allow me to watch from the sidelines. This is an unmitigated act of political grandstanding at the expense of taxpayers. This ordinance is beyond ludicrous. We fought too long and too hard to bow to this type of sheer mockery and this semantic argument. We've heard ad nauseum from Fred Richardson over the years. Please do not remove the word race from city forms and documents. This is an unnecessary expense, and the unintended consequences is the stuff of nightmares. I'd love to see this type of energy and expense used to create revenue and provide raises for retirees and current employees. This ultimately is a waste of time and an argument steeped solely in semantics. Thank you for hearing me.
And thank you. And before Betty gets out of here, I don't know if you'll remember Betty, but she used to work for Dick Cashdollar many years ago and is a retired city employee. All right, Mr. Daves, you had...
Yeah, last week after this ordinance was introduced, there was an article on AL.com that John Sharp put up there. And I was interested to see that a spokesman at the American Civil Liberties Union had criticized the proposed ordinance, as had a respected history professor at Alabama State University. And I'd be interested, Madam Clerk, in seeing if the NAACP and the Southern Poverty Law Center have any comment on this ordinance. So if you would mind sending the draft ordinance to those two organizations and ask for their comment on it, I'd appreciate that.
All right. And Fred, you were out. I was just mentioning that we're still waiting for some information from the courts. And then Chief Batiste had some documents he was going to give us as well, so we don't have anything yet.
Okay.
We have laid the proposal over for at least 1 week. All right, Sabrina, very quickly, please. We're not making decisions today, so just keep that in mind.
Hi, how's everyone today? Do I have to give my address and my name?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
For the
Sabrina
record.
Mass, yes ma'am. 1050 Belvedere Circle West. How's everyone today? I have a question and a comment. Does anybody here, as long as I've been at the city council, actually know my nationality? I'm just asking anybody. Oh, yes, I'm a Texan. But I will let, my nationality, I am Puerto Rican. My mom is Puerto Rican. My dad is French. My dad is from France. So that is my nationality. And I'm very proud of those things. My family has been actually culturally mixed for many generations. So I'm proud of that. So my question is, because I have been pulled over by police, because I do speed, every now and then. And I haven't had problems personally with the police, because I try to be cordial with everyone. But if I were to have an incident and they ask me that, so are you trying to tell me that I would have to put black or white? I wouldn't have that. And I'm saying that because I understand the ethnicity, and I am culturally diverse. I've been culturally diverse. My family's culturally diverse, even my children, because that's a part of our heritage. So are you saying that if I have an incident that I would have to put black or white, which I'm neither. I'm Puerto Rican and French, which is from black descendants as well, and Caucasian descendant on both sides. You see what I mean? And I also want to know, has anyone ever did any research on other states and their forms? Because I'm from Texas, and I know even on job applications, they don't ask you your race or anything. That is not on there. And I know they have forms like you guys are talking about today, that they do have those options on federal and state forms with ethnicity, all kinds. And if they don't have, what is listed there, then you can write it in other. And also, does anybody understand the importance of the United States Census, which is, put out by the federal government? Why would there be a census if other cultures doesn't matter? So I'm kind of confused on what everybody is. I hear everybody saying, and I respect everyone, but I think that's what Councilman Richardson is actually getting at. Like, why do we have to be classified as one or the other when we're, and if everyone here probably actually did their DNA, they might be shocked at what they have in their bloodline. I'm just saying. So I understand where his tone is about. And I just want to know, I think that in a form it is kind of disrespectful that I'm a human on this earth, that I can't put what I am. So I think that is kind of blatant discrimination. And that's just how I feel. So I understand his concept, and I would hope that others would have an open and broad mind about I don't think that anybody here is trying to say, oh, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist. Because I try to respect everybody up here. I think the point is people like me. What about where do I fit in? Where does my family fit in? I'm married to a black man. He is not ashamed to say he's black. He did 27 years in the United States Air Force, served this country, and retired honorable. And he's married to me, and he knows. My husband has called me black, and I'm like, I'm not black. I'm Puerto Rican and French. We've had that discussion, and now he knows that I feel strongly about that. And then when people ask him, what is your wife? Because, people don't know what I am. I look all kinds of ways. He says, my wife is Puerto Rican and French. Because that's my heritage. My children, their father is black, but guess what? They are a third of what I am. That's how that goes. My kids have French and Puerto Rican. My children, as you know, they have been here before. They speak fluent Spanish. I speak fluent Spanish. I speak French. I speak Ebonics. I speak good English. So where do people like Mike fit in? And
But you understand what we've ascertained here. It's so much. Almost all of the information we ask for, we ask for because it has to be passed up to the state and federal government, and they require that it be asked in a certain way.
And I do understand that, but that is how laws change, through the process of local and state government. Why can't Mobile, Alabama be the state, the city, to say, this is what the citizens want. Let's try this and see what happens. At least try it and see what happens. Just try it and see what happens. And if the government comes back and you know what, who are you, Mr. Davis, say, you know what, if I say, let's pass this, they may come to you and say, Mr. Davis, Councilman Davis, I'm sorry, this is a good idea. Let's just go stamp everything in the United States of America and change it so people can have a choice. Life is about choices. We're Americans. We are Americans. And we have to give some respect where respect is due. I respect you, Councilman Davis. I respect Councilman, whatever you guys. I'm just saying, today in Alabama, where do I fit in with this black and white? I'm just like here, like that's not what I am. That's not what I am. I'm mixed up with all this. So I don't know if that makes sense, but sometimes it takes a stance. You're a councilman. You have some power. Councilman Small. Councilman Manzi, Ms. Ritt, you guys are our people. You talk for us. We you know what? And I have respect for you guys because I have faith in the city I live in. I can't change the laws. We are here. You guys have the power. You are our representatives. And not just because I come here day after day on these streets. For many years, I have been speaking highly of this city council, this mayorship, the chief of police, Congressman Bradley Byrne, because I want people to know we have faith. We have faith, and we trust that you guys will listen, not just hear us and go home, and that's all I'm saying. You are our people. You have the power to change not just the city of Mobile. You may have the power to change this whole government system with one thing.
Ms. Mass, I'm going to have to,
I know.
This is just a committee meeting today, and we're making no decisions
and
today.
Thank you.
But I do want to remind you that a lot of our forms have exactly what you're asking for on them already.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
And thank you very much.
All right, and Reggie, short. This is a committee meeting, not making decisions, so
Madam,
we don't need a long speech. Please.
Madam Chair, excuse me, members of the committee, members of the council, members of the administration that are here, that are present. Thank you, Madam President, for having the gesture to the chairwoman so I can speak. I will, in spite of our popular belief, keep this pretty short.
We appreciate it.
Carry something around in my pocket, but you do know I have to give my prelude before I give my sentence. So I carry something around in my pocket.
Yeah, can't hear you. Could you speak into the microphone?
All right now. I don't want to be too loud down here. But I carry something in my pocket everywhere I go each week. It's on this keychain. And it's very simple, which I'm sure all of you know. From enchanting tradition, enduring progress. It reminds me of exactly what this place is, all right? So I can't be upset with individuals who may not look like me because they have no idea what I've been through. I can't do it. But what we have to continue doing is bringing my point of negotiation to the until we're all able to be a part of the discussion and our input, regardless of what zip code we're from. So to sum all of that up, when we look at this idea about race, I'm going to address this Tuesday so I can keep these things short. We can eliminate the terminology and the concepts will still be in place, Madam Chair. We can eliminate the name and identification, and the same strongholds that have held people back will still be in place. If we replace it with ethnicity, it goes from me saying I'm a black man to an African American man. And the same things that we hadn't seen before are the same things that we probably won't see again. So, in short, I believe because we have been through this tradition, we've been at the forefront, we've been the piloteers, we've been the innovators, we could be the ones to give America, starting with the state of Alabama, an example of how to approach this. Because as each of us have said in this chamber at some point in time, it's not unique to this area alone. This is all over the country. So we could be bold enough, just as those people were at the beginning, in the inception of this city, the inception of this state, and to put something on the table that erases this idea, which I believe each of us are trying to get away from. I think that's the approach we need to take. So that's saying an example I gave this morning, and I'm coming to a close. At college, when your grades were posted, they'll post them outside the door. They have all these different numbers in place. We have birth dates. We have addresses. We have social security numbers. So it's some kind of way we can think of something to identify the person so that what they're submitting will be what is being examined and assessed, and not the color of their skin. Because most people get it, but that plays a huge role in everything that you do. Everything that you do, regardless of where you live. So I would just challenge all of these staff members that are here, our leaders, let's look at something that's going to be centrist and bring all these ideas to the table so they can be sufficient for all people. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thanks. Before we adjourn, okay, Mr. Richardson wants to
just close out.
have some closing remarks, and then I'll just sort of close us down after that.
Okay.
And Bess as well.
Okay, I have this I have the census form here, and it says race on the census form. This is what the census people said. Your answer to this question should be based on how you identify. Each person can decide how to answer. You are free to choose which box to mark or not mark. That is up to you to decide that issue. And that's what ethnicity is saying. It's up to you. They're not trying to tell you to put down black or white. This is people that's telling you that your question based on this is how you identify yourself. It's up to you. When you get to that box, mark anything you want to mark down there. Or don't mark nothing. That's what this. We got to put it like that because they won't take. The federal government says it's up to you to decide who you are. Right here, black and white.
All right, Ms. Rich?
Thank you. A lot of what is we're talking about is the Civil Rights Act that goes back to 1964, and I'm going to read it. There are 11 sections: prohibited discrimination in the workplace, public accommodations, public facilities, and agencies receiving federal funds, and strengthening prohibitions on school segregation and discrimination in voter registration. And just yesterday added was considered also a special class, the LGBTQ, because of their sexual, I guess, identities. And it was not a unanimous decision, but they now have exactly the same things in all that category. And having to put down your race tracks these things for actually happening and documentation. So it's very important that we not just have verbiage on a piece of paper, but something where people can then claim that they were discriminated against and why, and this is a law to protect them. So again, it's very important that this information is received and documented. And I respect our council member who created this document for us to go through, and we are still making it a work in progress to find out if there's any repetition or a reason. We heard about in court, it might not be necessary to have that, but there are just certain things that have to be tracked. And but you are free to put whatever you want and however you class yourself. It's okay. There is no police that oversee that. That comes from the individual. So again, this is to document that we are living by the guidance of the Civil Rights Act. Thanks.
Any bets before we close? All right, thank you. Again, we're still waiting for some other documents to come in, and it is a work in progress. If there are any documents that we can change, I think the council wants to look at that. If there are some that absolutely have to stay as they are because of guidelines and restrictions by the state or the federal government, we have to consider that as well. We have laid this proposal over for 1 week. Don't know if we need to have another committee meeting, how we need to handle this. I will be out next week, so I guess I will just speak with other members of the committee and see what you all want to do going forward. All right. Any move to adjourn?
So move.
All right. Second?
Second.
All right. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.